Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the John Adams Young Composers Program Spring 2020 concert. Obviously, this is a little bit of an unusual concert for us. Normally, we'd be hanging out in, well, the auditorium that you see around me here and watching this concert live. But coronavirus and COVID-19 have reared their unpleasant heads and caused a lot of changes, both in the program and, of course, in the world. The students, though, have risen to that challenge and those changes. It's pretty spectacular to see the work that they've done. It's um, an emotionally difficult time, I think, for everyone. And from that perspective, it's particularly inspiring to see young people come together and make true and beautiful artistry. And I think that you'll see some interesting things during this concert. So because of the changes, we haven't really been able to focus on chamber music in quite the same way. We do have some chamber music pieces, some which are recorded by people who happen to live together, musicians that happen to live together, which is great. Some of which have been edited together, having a digital editing component of the program. And then we also have students who have opted to write solo pieces or pieces that focus on incorporating electronics and other aspects to their music. So please listen and enjoy the show. And we're going to start with our first piece. Thank you. the interview screen. Skyler, what a wonderful piece. I'm so glad
Hello.
you got to hear it.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about this piece? What is this piece about? What occurred in it?
Yeah. So this piece is about, well, of course, there's a spire called Amygdala, and these a group of people are traveling to the spire to call upon the assistance of like a godlike entity. It's sort of alien-like. It's sort of celestial, and they want this creature to help basically save the world. The world's ending and they want it to save it. And in the end of this piece, they get it on their side. So it's, yeah.
So it's a happy piece.
Yeah, yeah.
So where did this story come from, Skyler?
It comes from inside my head. Honestly, I don't know. It was like, I don't know. It just comes out. It's an idea and then it turns into a piece. I don't.
It's an idea and then it turns into a piece. I'm sure that a lot of composers feel that way a lot of the time. Well, I just loved hearing it. How much did this piece change in conception, in idea behind it, in maybe the story itself when we had to start practicing social distancing and social isolation?
Yeah. So I would say actual core of this piece, like the plot, a lot of the beats is actually the same as when it started. When I first conceptualized this piece, it began as actually a solo piano piece. And then in the beginning of the semester, I was going to compose, like arrange it more for a larger ensemble. I originally planned to have some woodwinds, a drum set, but after social distancing, I had to bring it back to solo piano. And in some ways, I think that was sort of, it brought me back to the central like core of the original idea. So I guess it it didn't change all that much. It's more original than what was intended, I guess.
Interesting. That's fascinating to hear. Well, thank you very much for sharing your piece with us. That was absolutely lovely.
You're welcome.
Next up, we're going to be listening to
Thank
Connor
you.
Johnson's work, We Can't Go On. Connor, that was a lot of fun. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the gestation of this piece, where this piece came from?
So this piece was written back in January, actually. It was written for my school's big band, and um, really, I mean, we can't go on. It's kind of ironic because it kind of like perfectly sums up what we're going through right now. Because it's kind of like about, I guess, almost grief in a way, but not really. Um, it's supposed to be somber and really just kind of how I feel when I'm this kind of way. It's almost sad, but not really sad. I guess in a literal sense, I use like a diatonic minor scale for the melody. Meanwhile, pretty much all the chords in the bass line are in major. So you kind of get this mix of like a bittersweet melody that isn't really a particular emotion
Hmm.
per se. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of clever and a fun way to sort of manipulate the emotional content of the piece.
Yeah.
Very cool, very
Thank
nicely
you.
done. And can you tell me about what this piece is? Not the piece that you were originally intending on writing for this semester-long project, but in fact a slightly earlier piece, but one that hasn't been performed. Can you walk me through that whole process?
Yeah, so actually what happened was before the whole COVID lockdown, I was planning on having like two separate songs. I was going to write it more or less at the same time. So this song was for our school's big band, as I kind of talked about earlier, and I just finished it right before everything got locked down. And we got one rehearsal in, and I was super excited to have it done the spring concert, and then it didn't really happen. And so during the quarantine, I started working on a song for this class, which I think kind of got a little mixed up in the beginning. Might have seen it said three movements. That was actually supposed to be my other song.
It
Yeah,
happens.
but it's quite all right. But yeah, so that song was coming along nicely, and then my program that I was using, it was fully digital, decided to break down and kind of ruin my song very close to the end.
Oh,
So I was a little concerned of what to do, and I was thinking, I was like, well, I mean, I do have this complete song, and it was supposed to premiere around the same time as this one. And I was kind of thinking about the meaning of it, and I was like, it fits the theme, and it fits what we're going through right now. So I switched it out, and I talked to Matthew about it, and I said, yeah, why don't we play this one instead? And I think it'll still be nice, and I'd like to hear it too.
that's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is that conveniently, shortly before this all went down, this whole lockdown thing is when you started getting interested in electronics and recording software
Yeah.
and sort of the other side of the non-acoustic side of classical music, which is something that we haven't really been focusing on lately. But you developed your own interest in this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, kind of like a little after winter break, I started kind of looking into it because I kind of aspired to be like a game or film scorer, and I mean, there's a lot of different motivations for me trying to dabble into this. One of them is I was thinking about like writing this like YouTube show where I like record my own voice and have like the music over it, and I was thinking of like playing electronic music instead of just straight like recording because I don't really have access to a ton of musicians, or I should say I don't have the funding for a ton of musicians. So and there's a lot of other reasons. I thought it would just be generally helpful for my like future career. And I was
Mm.
also talking with a couple of like college professors from across the nation. They were all kind of recommending different softwares for me to use. And so before the pandemic, I was kind of starting to dabble in it, and I was writing a couple short songs. I was like kind of feeling the program out, and I have to say it is very different than acoustic composition. There's no
Mm.
sheet music or like notation, and there's a lot more like buttons. It was very interesting to learn, and I'm a little upset that my song didn't turn out, but
Mm.
I'm gonna finish it, and hopefully
Good.
somebody people will hear it one day.
We'll absolutely find a place to share it. I promise you
Yeah,
that. No problem. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Connor, for sharing this piece with us.
you're welcome.
That was Connor Johnson's We Can't Go On.
Mhm.
Next up, we're going to have Stephen Lee, Two Landscapes of the Mind. Stephen, that is a wonderful piece. Talk to me a little bit about writing it. How did you come up with all those ideas? What do you think? What do you think led to this piece?
Well, first of all, thank you, I guess. And second of all, well, this sort of, I guess, semester's assignment was to create a piece based off something, whether it's like an emotion, trying to evoke emotion, or like an atmosphere of a place or something, or like a story. And yeah, that's what I had to start off with. So I picked sort of like a place, I guess, to just depict, and sort of like that, and like sort of messing around with like the vague notion of like creating an ambient piece, I guess. So there was originally, I started off with the first movement, and I was gonna create something based off that. And then I was originally going to do like multiple places, because we have like two movements right now, because I felt that I didn't want to like overuse or like overstay any of the individual ones, because I felt like I couldn't just like create like a 2-minute piece or something. I felt like that would be a bit too short. Not that being short is necessarily a bad thing, but like not much content for like this.
It wasn't what you wanted to do. It's not that it was a bad thing.
So I took multiple, which eventually, because of circumstances, eventually went to 2, which is the ones that are here. Yeah.
And when did the titles come to you? Did you always know that you were writing about the forest and the city, or is that something that came in the piece later in the process?
That's basically what I started off with, and yeah, that's like the base for most of the stuff I did. At least they kept that stuff in mind.
Wonderful. I love the way you got the 3 instruments to blend. It's an unusual instrumentation: piano, and guitar and oboe. Why did you pick those 3 instruments, and how did you find writing for them? Did you learn anything about how they work together or don't work together?
Well, the thing about it is that those 3 instruments specifically, I wasn't necessarily intending for like a specific emotion that they would like create combined, or like anything like that. It was mostly just I wanted to write for a piano and guitar and oboe, and I thought that those would work well, I guess.
So you just liked those 3 instruments and thought they should combine?
Yeah, not necessarily, but those were things I wanted to do, and I had all of these for this assignment. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to hear this piece, Stephen. I really had a wonderful time with it. I thought that Jesse Barrett, Anne Rainwater, and Robert Nance all did a fantastic job performing it, and I feel very lucky that I got to hear it. Next up, we have Lukas Moy's piece, Apprentice, played by Caitlin McSherry and Drew Ford. Lucas, that was wonderful. So the piece is called Apprentice. Can you tell me a little bit about what this piece is about?
So when I was writing the piece, I wanted to try and capture sort of one-on-one teacher-student relationship. And I thought that Apprentice kind of captures that more than student does, because nowadays, a student is like one of 30 people in a class. Whereas Apprentice is, we don't really have apprentices anymore, but when we used to have apprentices, it was more one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you were interested in that relationship, why you wanted to write a piece about it, and then how you feel you reflected that relationship in your music?
Well, after doing a string quintet last semester, I kind of wanted to dumb down the instruments. So I was actually very lucky that I was already doing a duet when we went into shelter in place. So I didn't really have to make any big changes to my piece.
Mm.
But I was thinking two instruments, and two instruments in a duet. I also kind of wanted to have some call and response. So it just kind of hit me. Yeah, suppose I could have a teacher instrument and a student instrument, and that'd be pretty fun to do. And then I just started doing it.
And which instrument was which?
Cello was a teacher because, old age equals low voice or whatever.
My voice isn't that low.
And then the violin was the student.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally going to be an oboe, but shelter in place.
Fair enough. And how do you think the music showed the teacher-student relationship over? Was it a constant thing, or did it develop and change over the course of the piece?
I tried to have it so that the teacher would be kind of the same throughout, and the student would kind of grow to putting in their own ideas in the discussion that they had.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much for sharing your piece with us. I had a wonderful time, and I felt myself reflected in that cello playing. So thank you very, very much. Next up, we're going to go listen to Simon Starbuck, The Ballad of the Armchair. Simon, you have to tell me about this piece. It is so crazy, and these images that we're looking at are so appropriate yet unusual. Talk to me about the whole conception from start to finish.
Yeah, of course. So basically, it's meant to be sort of a day in the life of a cat, okay? So the beginning is this dark and stormy night, essentially. The beginning of any piece is that. And it sort of builds until the morning where you hear my sister Matilda, she says prickles, and that's sort of supposed to signify like dawn, and they're all waking up. And then you hear the pitter patter of all their feet in the violin, and then the cello plays like a melody that represents all the cats in our house. We sort of try to just improvise something while the other cats were in the room and just try to think what they sounded like. But then the storm comes back, but this time it's a lot harder. And you hear actual like things blowing down and wind chimes and that kind of thing. And the violin goes really high and scratchy and that kind of thing. And that's supposed to mean that all the cats are scared. And yeah. And then it all pitters back down and they all go to sleep. And it's a happy ending. And the end is their dreams.
Oh, that's lovely. And tell me, how did you create a piece like this? Did you notate out the notes? Did you do all the? How did you do this?
So some of it was notating, but most of it was just thinking about what would a cat think in the moment and adapting what I was playing or what my sister was playing to what the cat would think. So the violin is mostly written out, but it goes all over the place and it's super scratchy, and that's sort of the point because it's supposed to be chaotic. And I felt that it would be more genuine if I didn't write anything down because it's supposed to sound chaotic.
That's a really interesting point. I kind of like that. That's really clever. And can you talk to me a little bit about how this piece changed from pre-coronavirus to post-coronavirus? Because this was always the intention for the piece, but obviously this is a very different form than you originally intended.
Yeah, so the beginning of the piece before quarantine was supposed to be, it was almost a string quartet, except I subbed cello for a bass. But since when we moved to quarantine,
cool.
yeah,
Right, just putting it out there. Basses.
Also, I would be able to play it next year. But, yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
But after quarantine happened, there was a new avenue that I could, think about, which was the electronic side of writing music. So I thought maybe since I have this time to do it, let me explore something new. And it wasn't going to work as well because all of the parts were on top of each other and it would be really hard to sync them. So I resorted more to maybe two parts, which I could play at the same time so that it would sync better. And then I would add a lot of extra sound effects and pre-recorded stuff that I had added that didn't necessarily have to go in a specific time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. And you collaborated with your sister on this project a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, so she also helped to improvise part of it and just worked on it generally and gave me feedback, which was really helpful because it sounded completely different in all the iterations.
That's fantastic. Simon, really great work. This is a wonderful piece. I'm very happy that we got to hear it. Next up, we're going to listen to Matera's Introduction and Havanaise. He will be playing it himself, a work for solo violin. Sadly, Kai is unable to join us right now, but that introduction in Havanese I thought was a lot of fun. Really fun to hear such beautiful dance music done on solo violin, but with double tracking and recording over himself. I thought that was fantastic. Really great work. Thank you, Kai. Next up, we're going to listen to Matilda Starbuck's piece, Pandora's Orchard. So we managed to track down Kai, so we're going to do his interview now. Obviously, this is for not the piece that we just listened to by Matilda Starbuck. This is for the violin piece just before that by Kai Matera. Kai, can you tell us a little bit about your piece, this introduction in Havanese? Tell us about it. Tell us about the conceit of it. Tell us about where it came from.
So my piece is mainly about kind of the situation I am right now, which is shelter in place. The scales in the beginning represented sort of like the frustration that only a few days ago I was able to see people person to person. This was like in the first few days of quarantine when I started writing this piece.
Mhm.
I was also very frustrated with school because the curriculum became much less challenging. There were mistakes in like the grade book. It would take weeks, months for a teacher to change it. That was very frustrating for me.
I want to be clear that I don't give grades in this program, and so I am not one of those teachers who had that problem. Keep going, Kelly.
That's good. Yeah, so in other words, it's very confusing, frustrating, it's very angering all at the same time. And after the introduction, though, we get introduced to a new melody, and it's the Havanese. This melody sort of reflected the fact that I knew that the situation of not being in touch with other people and this constant frustration with the situation would continue for a while, longer than I expected. And I guess this piece was kind of following the path, sort of my life in quarantine, while I was writing it, which is interesting.
Interesting.
And at the end, you get this calm. Sorry, what?
Oh no, keep going. Sorry, please keep going.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So at the end, kind of a calm, sort of light at the end of the tunnel thing, which is kind of like the future for me. So you get like the past, the present, and the future. So yeah, at some point, this pandemic is going to end, sometime hopefully in the near future. And yeah, all the anxiety and frustration turns into a very calm 4-note G chord. So yeah.
Beautiful. So I noticed that a lot of your frustration was expressed in the Havanese as a dance. That's not a normal way that people, well, I guess sometimes people express frustration that way, but it still seems an interesting choice to me. Can you talk to me about why you chose to express frustration in this dance rhythm?
So I'm actually not 100% sure why I chose a dance, but it sort of, that rhythm kind of let me get my anger out in a way, but the change of positivity at the end was what gave it its color, sort of, I think.
Wonderful. I love that embodied sense that you bring to it. Your violin playing is fantastic as well. Thank you so much for sharing it. How did you go about recording it? When did you record it? How did you make this whole piece happen?
I actually recorded it yesterday and today because I actually did record this like a few days before, but the audio was terrible. And so I had to do it again. It was a challenge. Editing was more of a challenge. It was all a struggle, but I sent it like 1-2 hours before the concert, and I guess it worked out.
Well, we're all learning
yeah,
in quarantine together, so you know it comes
I
good.
guess, yeah.
Well, Kai, that was really fun. I'm really glad that we got to hear your piece. I thought it was great. I'm very glad you got it in on time. For those of you watching the stream, we are going to go briefly to a corrective screen, and then when we come back, we'll interview Matilda, whose piece you just heard. And we are back with Matilda Starbuck, the composer of the piece that you just heard for violin and cello. So Matilda, can you tell us a little bit about Pandora's Orchard? Who is Pandora? What is her orchard?
So Pandora is my cat, and I thought that an orchard, I chose the word orchard because it feels like it sort of feels calm on the outside, but then there's tiny little battles happening everywhere, and both the orchard and Pandora were kind of, I feel like, symbolized when it sort of felt bouncy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So tell me about the writing of this piece. How did you start writing it? How did you come to this idea? How did this piece take shape?
So I started at the beginning of the semester. I just thought I wanted to write an Irish inspired piece, and then I sort of just started writing some stuff, and then yeah.
Hmm. And yeah, do you feel like you kept true to your Irish inspiration?
I'm not sure exactly because I guess there's a lot of different variations to Irish music.
Mm. There are a lot of different variations to Irish music. Yeah, it's not a culture that is simple in its understanding of music. That's wonderful. So how do you feel your piece changed from before quarantine to after quarantine? What differences did you have to make? How did you have to adapt to that situation?
It wasn't very different, but I guess the only thing was just working on it because it felt different because we were on the quarantine.
Mm.
And
It changed your attitude?
I guess, yeah. At some points, I was a little stressed, more than I would have been probably.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. And was this your first time hearing the recording? I don't think I sent it to you beforehand.
Yeah,
How'd you feel about it?
it was really, really different than the MIDI, and it was
Mhm.
much better.
Yeah, it was much better. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was much, much better.
Yeah, so you've been working off like the computer recording for a while, and so hearing it live is very different.
Yeah,
Was it what you expected?
it sounded better than what I expected.
Nice. So are you a better composer than you thought you were?
It might. I feel like it's more just. It sounds really, really good with real instruments.
It's true. And Drew and Caitlin brought a lot to it too. I'm sure they played fantastically. Well, thank you so much, Matilda, for sharing your music with us. Next up, we have Kibriya Cooper-Malek and her piece Cypress Morning. Kibriya, that was beautiful. There's a lot of haunting and gorgeous sounds in there. I particularly like the way that you develop your melodic language over the course of the piece. That saxophone solo in particular just stuck out to me. But there's a lot of just as special parts. So this piece is actually in 4 movements. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this piece is about one of my favorite places, and it's in Point Reyes. It's this really beautiful spot. There's this like cliff over the ocean, and there's these really tall cypress trees all around. And I wrote about it, and so each section is describing a different aspect of the place. So the first one was grass, and then the trees, the ocean, and then rain.
Hmm. And you've been there in the rain?
Yeah, it was drizzling when I went there, and it was so beautiful and really peaceful. So I think that's why it's one of my favorite spots.
Is this a place that you visited many times or just once or?
I've been there a couple times camping, and but it just like immediately I remembered it when I thought of something that I wanted to write about for my piece.
Mhm. Well, you really do a fantastic job evoking a sense of place, and a peaceful place as well at that. Um, how did coronavirus at all affect this piece? Did it change the way that you worked on it? Did it change the way you thought about it?
Originally, I was planning for it to be a live performance.
Mm.
So I was going to write pieces, parts that were possible to play. But after I heard that we were going to be doing it and we could do it electronically, I was already planning to kind of like notate it electronically to get the sound in my head. But I actually used the saxophone with a range that is not possible. It goes from bari all the way to alto. And so I think that's like a fun little thing that I was able to do that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
So you literally took this as like a license to break the laws of physics, to do whatever you wanted with these instruments, things that these instruments couldn't even possibly do.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really clever. I like that a lot. Well, thank you so much again for sharing this with us. It's so peaceful and beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we're going to be listening to Kuzey Sozat's Piano Sonata 2. This piece is in 2 movements and will be played by Philip Jung. Kuzey, what a awesome first movement and haunting second movement. A lot of dichotomy going on there. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? What's going on in this piece?
Thanks. So the first movement is like a march, and the feeling it's conveying is aggressive excitement. And the second movement is more slow and labored, and occasionally it resolves, but it centers more around the slow, labored feeling.
Yeah, who are some of your musical influences? Who do you feel helped influence this piece? Just artistic people, composers, artists, whatever.
Probably the biggest influence is Rachmaninoff, and another influence is Prokofiev and their musical styles. it influenced me a lot in general, and also for this piece.
Yeah, you can certainly see that, particularly in the way that you write for the piano, right? There's a lot of that. Well, those are composers who understood the piano very, very well, and you are heading in a similar direction. Is this the whole piece? Is there supposed to be more at some point, or what can you tell me about that?
There's probably going to be a third movement of the piece, so it's not the whole piece. Yeah, but these are just the first two movements so far.
Wonderful. Well, it's already a fantastic piano sonata. I can't wait to hear more of it. Kuzey, I also want to take a second to just ask you, how long have you been in the John Adams Young Composers Program?
I've been in the John Adams Young Composers Program since 8th grade. And I think I started the summer of 7th grade. So yeah.
So 5.5 years. That makes you our longest running student currently, which is fantastic and a little bit bittersweet because unfortunately for me, apparently you are graduating and you will have a school to attend. Talk to us a little bit about that. Do you know where you're headed in the fall? Or
I'm most likely attending Duke in the fall. Yeah, I'm excited to go there and be a student there.
Well, congratulations. They're lucky to get someone like you. I can
Thanks.
speak from experience that having a student like Kuzey Sozat in your class is a good experience. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your music with us. And I will miss you in the fall, as will your classmates. They'll miss your feedback during our round robins where we give everyone comments. So thank you very, very much. Next up and last on the concert, we're going to end with a piece by Penina Biddle. This piece is called Just Before This, a Bird Made a Really Cool Sound. That is a very haunting collection of sounds that you have there, Penina. Tell us a little bit about it. Where did this come from? What is this about? What are we even listening to?
I took a walk and recorded it and then chopped it up into really small pieces and layered them over each other.
Interesting. And how did you figure out to do this? How did you, like, what guided your decision-making process as you created this soundscape?
I wanted to like show how it feels to like have a cross between, oh my god, whoa, I'm hearing myself on. I wanted to evoke like a really disembodied feeling of human, like live human noises and like completely edited non-human noises.
So the idea was to create a disembodied effect. Why did you want to create that sound? Most people create pretty things or angry things, but why this sense of being disembodied?
Well, I think that had a lot to do with like the feeling of being quarantined and like the lack of human contact that we're all experiencing right now. And like I was going on this walk and like the closest I could get to other people was 6 feet, and it just felt really like separated.
Yeah, it does. It feels very, very distant, being on those walks and still being apart from people, seeing everyone together and yet still apart. Well, that's fascinating. You are, again, unfortunately for me, another one of our students who is graduating and on their way out. How long have you been a member of the John Adams Young Composers Program?
I think 5 years.
5 years. Wow, you too. It's quite a long time. That's what, 9, 10 pieces that you've written for us over these years, probably more because we've had little projects aside from that. So it's a good portion of your life. And what are you doing in the fall? Do you know?
Assuming that schools open up, I'm attending Oberlin Conservatory for Technology and Music and Related Arts.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations. They're getting a fantastic student in you. And you certainly will be missed here.
Miss you too.
Excellent. So that is the entirety of our program. Thank you, everyone who has been watching. We really appreciate you sticking around and supporting these fantastic students. I also want to do a quick thank you, first and foremost, to the wonderful music teachers that work for the John Adams Young Composers Program. That's Preben Antonsen, Mario Godoy, Dan Becker, and Belinda Reynolds. All of them have worked so hard with your students, helping to teach them, helping guide them, and helping them grow. It's really been absolutely inspirational to see their work. So please, if you can, send them an email, thank them for working with your child or your friend. And from there, I also want to just do a quick shout out to the Crowden staff. Putting together a concert like this is certainly unusual. It's not something that we normally have to do or normally get to do, but they've been very helpful and very supportive. We've been sending passwords back to get into the YouTube channel and all that stuff. And so it's been really a good thing for us to be able to do. And I'm glad that we're able to share this music in some form, even in this form. And I think that it really is a testament to the creativity of the students that it all has just come together, ironically, I think, incredibly well and beautifully. I think everything is influenced by the situation at hand, but because of that, they have found a way to be even more creative than they already were, which I did not think was possible. So I'm very grateful to them. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and take care of yourselves. Farewell.